Now it's time for Lefties Losing It, and let's have a gander at the Oscars, the night devoted to celebrating excellence in cinema. Well, except it's not anymore. It's a massive leftist snorefest featuring a bunch of pretentious films no one's bothered to watch, but satisfy the Academy's diversity quotas, or inclusion standards as they call it. And of course, they started the ceremony with an incoherent land acknowledgement delivered by actress Julianne Hough.
We gather in celebration of the Oscars on the ancestral lands of the Tongva, Tataviam, and Chumash peoples, the traditional caretakers of this water and land. We honor and pay our respects to Indigenous communities here and around the world.
The what tribe now? Didn't they slaughter the previous tribes that lived there? Matt Walsh tweeted this response to the Oscars' vacuous virtue signalling. He wrote, she paid homage to the Tongva tribe, but the Tongva moved into Southern California thousands of years after it had already been occupied by a more ancient tribe. They killed and displaced the inhabitants and took over. If they get to claim the title of Indigenous, then so do we. Interesting point there. Almost like lands and people have been conquered over and over again throughout history, and perhaps assigning collective guilt or collective reverence and praise to people based on their colour or ethnicity is not the best of ideas. But back to the Oscars, and when you think about what a far-left lunatic asylum Hollywood has become, then you won't be surprised that the most nominated film this year was a Mexican musical about a transgender cartel leader. No, really. The film Emilia Perez had 13 nominations, including for Best Picture, and it even scored a Best Actress nomination for a dude identifying as a woman, Carla Sofia Gascon. In the end, the film won 2 Oscars, including for Best Supporting Actress for Zoe Saldana, and let's have a look at her stellar work. This is just amazing.
Man to woman.
From penis to vagina. Is it for you?
For me? Yes, she got an Oscar for that, and the audience, those crazy enough to sit through that entire film, got an education in all the different types of trans operations.
Vaginoplasty.
Yes.
Rhinoplasty.
Yes.
Laryngoplasty.
Yes.
Control laryngoplasty.
What is that?
Adam's apple reduction.
Yes, yes, yes.
And it's not just actors who've been spewing activist nonsense. Singer Pink is never one to miss out on an opportunity to make a fool of herself. Here she is earlier in the year claiming that, what?
Ladies and gentlemen, and every other gender that absolutely exists, I give you the incredible John Mayer.
Yeah, but they don't, Pink. There are 2, count them 2, everything else is performative attention-seeking. Now to a trans activist posing this important question. The answer is quite obvious, I would have thought, but sadly lost on this soul.
So trans people are considered a danger to women in sports, yet they're considered a weakness to the United States military? Make it make sense, MAGA.
I would have thought that's because the US Army isn't fighting against female combatants exclusively. If it were, then perhaps your question would be valid, but alas, you just went and made a massive fool of yourself and provided more content for Lefties Losing It, so I do thank you for that. Let's have a look now at the great work of Charlie Kirk. He goes to university campuses around America debating lost lefties. And this next gal needs all the help she can get.
Let's say there's, a black kid right now. Would you rather have that black kid have a role model be Kendrick Lamar or Clarence Thomas?
Kendrick, obviously.
So not the black American on the United States Supreme Court.
No, he's trying to ban interracial marriage. He's trying to do all.
Wow, no, he's in an interracial marriage.
He literally
He's married to a white woman.
Yeah, I know, the Roe v. Wade thing goes against.
He's trying to ban his own marriage?
Yes.
What can you say? But it's not just the students, it's the teachers too that Charlie Kirk has exposed for being utter fools. Here he asks the teacher a simple question: what is a woman? The guy thinks he's prepared for this obvious question, but watch him flounder.
Great teacher. Yes. What is a woman?
What is a woman? Oh, buddy. All right. So we define gender as a set of preferences that you have. Gender is a set of preferences we have. Woman is a social construct that we've agreed upon. Typically, we imagine womanhood as makeup or whatever. There is a difference between the word woman and being a biological female. Woman is a social construct that we use. Listen for a second. I'm telling you what it means.
There you go. It's just a set of preferences, a social construct. So if you like makeup and the colour pink, then you're a woman. I mean, can you get more backward than that? They had more enlightened values in the 1920s. These are the so-called progressives these days. That's what they call themselves. And our educator continued to dig himself a hole trying to answer a question which a child could easily answer.
Woman is a social construct. We agree on these set of preferences. If I tell you that I'm a man, it's because I want you to know that I like these set of preferences. If I tell you I'm a woman, it's because I want you to know that I agree with these set of preferences.
Can men give birth?
Can men or can males? If you listen to your bio professors, you would understand there's a difference between biology and what we think
So
about.
I want to thank you for proving a great point.
What?
You are why we should eliminate the Department of Education. Thank you very much.
That is scary. That is who's teaching your kids. That's why you save up for those college fees. I tell you, Charlie Kirk is so effective because he just gives them enough rope and they do the rest. And no wonder the lefties are tearing down posters for his events. Look at this mug entitled Brat.
Why do you feel the need to do that? Why do you feel the need to do that? Why do you feel the need to tear our posters down?
Because I don't like them.
Why?
I think you know
Why?
Joining me now is Sky News contributor Kosha Gator. Kosha, let's jump into the intensifying war of words between President Trump and President Zelenskyy, who has completely shifted from pledging to negotiate a peace deal. President Zelenskyy now says the end of the war is very, very far away, a statement that has seen a swift response from the White House.
He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time. And he better not be right about that. That's all I'm saying.
President Trump also wrote, "This is the worst statement that could have been made by Zelenskyy, and America will not put up with it for much longer." Kosha, Trump also pointed out in that statement that Keir Starmer's comments and comments from other European leaders who have pledged to support Ukraine, they've also said they can't do the job without the US. That's an important point that much of the media has missed. And I do wonder how that's going to happen with relations at this point.
So as the dust from that dust up settles, there's a picture that's clarifying that's coming out, which is on the one hand, you have a war that is not winnable and was never winnable without the US. And the U.S. involvement in large measure to the tune of $100 billion a year or more, plus this looming specter of security guarantees in whatever shape or form that took or was implied under the past administration for 4 years. And on the other hand, you have an election that took place, and Trump is a reflection of that election, which is that the American electorate has long time not been in favor of this. It is dropping like a stone, their support for the level of U.S. involvement, and Trump is reflecting that and personifying that. And it seems like President Zelenskyy has not caught up to that, like he hasn't updated his software yet in his mind. Maybe it's his own failing, maybe it's that he's just been in sort of the East Coast, West Coast bubbles whenever he visits and he doesn't understand the pulse of the American electorate.
Surely he's advised better than that. This is what was astonishing to so many. It was astonishing to me. It was astonishing to a lot of pro-Ukrainian experts who've been commenting on this crisis for 3 years, that he seemed to think it was 2020 or 2022. He did not go into that meeting with any sort of appreciation of how the public mood has shifted, what Trump campaigned on, and this is not a position Trump has come to just in the last week. He campaigned on this. It should be crystal clear where the current administration stands.
Absolutely. It's where he has stood previously, even before he entered political office. He has long time been against U.S. involvements. He's very much a non-interventionalist. Everybody knows this. To the point of advice, it almost sounds like to the contrary, he's been getting really bad advice because he met with Democrat senators before that meeting, like 1 hour before that infamous meeting.
Bad move.
And received advice from Mark Kelly and Murphy of Connecticut and others who seemed to have, they ran to their X feeds afterwards and presented little snippets where they were saying, we think it's a bad deal, it's reducing this to a business transaction, et cetera. So he seems to totally have misread how serious Trump and Vance are. These are not just words, and now there's reports that they're cutting off potentially all aid, humanitarian and military, so these stakes just got a lot higher for him.
I think that is that pause is going to be the wake-up call that we need now, that if you actually do want to have any sort of meaningful, lasting peace, you have to come to the negotiation table with the willingness to negotiate. Otherwise, we're going to have another 3 years of this disastrous war. The destruction in Ukraine in particular is just heartbreaking. Now, Donald Trump, Kosha, also pointed out Keir Starmer's comments, and there's been a lot of commentary about those comments and that of other leaders who've pledged to stand by Ukraine. Let's have a listen to what Keir Starmer had to say.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing. We're working with the US on this point after my meeting with President Trump last week. And let me be clear, we agree with the President on the urgent need for a durable peace.
Kosha, he went very quickly there from boots on the ground to this plan is dependent on the US backing it, to he agrees with President Trump about the urgent need for a durable peace. How do you see that statement? Because people have listened to that first section about boots on the ground. The whole thing only goes for 30 seconds, and they seem to have disregarded the subsequent 20 seconds.
And in this day and age of social media, you can just clip what you need and then engineer narratives around that. But it was funny for me because it reminded me of that great quote from the late and great Margaret Thatcher, whose seat he currently sits in, who said the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. And he and all of Europe is kind of showing that not at a national level, but at a global level. It's easy for them to talk tough when it relies on spending American money and maybe American troops. You can add troops to that sentence in addition to money. And so they're all paper tigers, and this Ukraine thing is sort of a flashpoint in what Trump is trying to do in terms of recalibrating the European-U.S. alliance as it relates to defense more broadly. And this is just an accelerant, I think, to that end game that he wants to get to.
And we do hear a lot from the European countries about how much they're doing for Ukraine, how much money they're contributing, how strong their support is. Meanwhile, this is the reality. The EU imported Russian fossil fuels in the third year of the invasion. The amount that they imported surpassed the 18.7 billion of financial aid they sent to Ukraine in 2024. So, Kosha, on the one hand, they are providing some aid, none of them as much as the US, but they're also enriching Russia because their own energy policies are so broken that they have become reliant on Russia for their energy.
That's such a great point, because there's been a lot of focus on one side of the ledger, which is how much money the U.S. is spending versus them on defense, and there's some dispute around the number we've put into Ukraine. But the point is, nobody disputes that the U.S. is carrying the lion's share of it. But the other side of the ledger, what you're showing, is fascinating too, because if they really cared, they would, I don't know, Germany would turn back on their nuclear industry that they decimated for green and other reasons. That would be one way to weaken them, maybe buy more from the US, maybe cut other types of deals. They're not doing that, so it's all talk, little action, unless it's easy action, like sanctioning Russia or freezing some of their assets in the banking sector. They've done a little bit there, but not really much more. And unless Zelenskyy comes back to the table, I think you're just going to see this whole trend continue.
And all this talk about the Trump administration is pro-Russia, pro-Putin, this absolute idiotic nonsense passing for analysis. Let's not forget, even in the first Trump term, he was in Europe telling Germany and other countries, do not become reliant on Russian energy. It is a weakness. And they laughed at him, Kosha. They did not heed that advice at all. And here we are, where they are emboldening, enriching the Putin regime at a time when they're saying that we stand with Ukraine.
Great point. And so many of the things that Trump says, they age really well. When they come out of his mouth, people don't like them. He's a little bit coarse. He's a little bit rough around the edges. But they always age, and he always ends up being true. And that was something that was very prescient, as are many other things that he said. And on the flip side, a lot of these European leaders are not exactly sympathetic figures, certainly not Keir Starmer among the electorate, not Zelenskyy. A lot of people just don't like him personally in terms of his demeanor and the amount of travel he does, and he goes to awards shows and has rung the bell at the stock exchange.
For fashion magazines.
Yes, he's not a sympathetic figure, and on this side they're trying to paint Trump as a stooge of Russia, and that whole thing has lost its potency, so that's not going to work anymore.
No, I think it had a bit more credibility when they were running that entire Russian collusion hoax. Not credibility, that's the wrong word, but people were believing that hysteria. But since that's been completely debunked, it just sounds like desperation. And on Europe, here is some more sobering data. Again, Europeans, many of them feel that Ukraine should be getting more support. The polling shows that. You can see that there. But the polling also shows that they don't want that support to come for their country. As you can see there, even the countries with the highest percentage of people wanting greater support for Ukraine, Denmark there is at the top of the list. 66% think Ukraine deserves more support. But only 17% of Danes, Kosha, want Denmark to increase its support. It really just sums up this European virtue signalling where they talk a big game, but really even their own populations don't have the appetite for greater support. And this is on their doorstep. So I don't see how people think Americans should care more about this. We shouldn't have an America first approach in the United States when this conflict is in Europe and the Europeans seem to be a little bit apathetic about it.
Yeah, it's going to be a big reckoning for them because the flip side of them stepping up their spending on defense and maybe them providing the security guarantee is going to mean cutting back spending, austerity measures, these big lavish social safety nets that Europe has loved and had for half a century. There are meaningful repercussions from this for them to kind of recalibrate their approach to government as a whole. And the other thing about that is that's very useful is it gets to the crux of the point, which is, yes, we all support this war ending. We support Ukraine's right to sovereignty. We certainly support their soldiers and civilians who've been harmed and killed and injured and displaced. We support democracy. Everybody supports those things. But when the rubber hits the road, what does it mean in terms of prioritization? And you as a nation spending money and spending troops to do that, that's where things shift because we live in reality. We don't live in utopia, and that's what even the Danes see that and everybody sees it, but the leaders don't seem to want to acknowledge it.
Well, most people do see it, but sadly, the bulk of the media seems to be not living in reality. They're living in some fantasy world. Well, I don't know, there's some sort of Greta Thunberg approach to geopolitics where, you know, what you want to happen must happen regardless of the reality. And the reality is Ukraine is losing this war. America doesn't want to keep funding it. And either you surrender to Russia, which nobody wants, you keep fighting with backing of European countries and the US soldiers on the ground, which could spark World War III with a nuclear power. I don't think anybody wants that either. Or you negotiate a peace deal that's advantageous to Ukraine. And that's where we were before this meltdown in the Oval Office. And we've seen many pro-Ukraine foreign policy experts, those who have championed extra funding for Ukraine from the US, have admired Zelenskyy for many years, be appalled by his antics in the White House and what has followed. And among them is Washington Post columnist Mark Thiessen, who has written a piece that saying Zelenskyy must mend the breach with Trump or resign. Kosha, he details Zelenskyy's conduct in that 50-minute press conference leading up to that clash. Everyone's seen the clash, but what led up to it, that 50 minutes, if you've watched the entire thing, it gives you a very different perspective. And he called President Zelensky's behaviour unnecessary and reckless, and questioned why he'd be so rude to Trump in front of the media when Trump was offering him a really advantageous deal. He was getting a great deal of what he wanted. And there were even concessions made, quite late in proceedings.
When you've lost Mark Thiessen and Lindsey Graham, by the way, who's been on fire excoriating Zelensky, he was the most pro-war U.S. involvement senator that we have. That is a signal that he did misstep here, even though not everybody in international media and even U.S. media is seeing it that way. And this was a great piece by Mark Thiessen because he went through the entire 49 minutes, and 40 of those 49 minutes where actually Trump was very magnanimous, very cordial. And throughout that time, there are multiple points at which Zelenskyy was kind of goading him.
When you watch the whole thing, I've got to say, one of the more shocking things was how patient President Trump was. That's not his style. He let so much go to the keeper until at some point it was too much and he had to step in and check Zelenskyy. But there was a lot of disrespect, a lot of behaviour that Trump wouldn't normally tolerate up until that point.
Absolutely. And that point was when Zelenskyy said that, you know what, you will feel it too, because you have an ocean. That's why you don't feel it now. You will feel it too. And at that moment, you can see Trump's entire demeanor change, his face lit up. And he said, American people are watching this. You do not come here. You're in no position to say that.
Absolutely. And it was an astonishing comment to suggest that America is somehow should be fearful of a Russian invasion. Kirsha Gator, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Now, the world's media is again engaging in hyperbole, shrieking in unison about President Trump's attempts to engineer a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. But Donald Trump's approach, one he articulated at length during the election campaign, is actually popular with Americans who are sick of funding these endless wars. Even CNN can't deny that reality.
Well, I think the easiest way we can kind of just ask this is, do Americans like the way that Trump's handling his job and compare it to how they felt about Joe Biden? So this is the net approval rating. You look at Joe Biden back in 2024, he was 22 points underwater. Holy cow. You look at Donald Trump, it's just a different planet entirely. I mean, the gulf between these two is wider than the Gulf of America or Mexico, depending on which side of the aisle you stand on. He's at +2. So look, at this particular point, Americans are giving Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt. He's doing considerably better than Joe Biden was doing on the handling of the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Joining me now is comic and host of Primetime with Alex Stein on Blaze TV. Alex Stein, those numbers are for all voters, but among Republican voters, amongst Trump supporters, the figures are much higher. And I've got to say, it's mighty nice to see CNN forced to report all of that.
Yeah, no, it does feel nice to see them have to actually, show Donald Trump in a positive light. But I still don't believe anything that CNN posts with numbers. I don't trust them whatsoever. But listen, people are sick of it. There's people struggling in California with the wildfires. There's people struggling in North Carolina. And there's people that are just struggling because of the inflation that Biden caused us. So listen, we're sick of sending billions of dollars to Ukraine where American citizens on both sides of the aisle are struggling. So we're sick of this war and it needs to end right now.
Now, today we had the First Lady at the Capitol. She attended a roundtable in support of the Take It Down Act. This is a bill that seeks to protect people from others sharing non-consensual, sexually explicit images, as well as deep fake pornography. It's a relatively new issue. Let's hear from Melania.
A 15-year-old brave young woman, Alison Spears, used AI to create non-consensual intimate images of her and then spread the images across social media. They superimposed her face into pornographic content without her consent, solely to humiliate her.
Alex, I've always seen her as a massive asset, an underutilised asset, I would argue, in the Trump camp. She's clearly passionate about this project.
Well, I think Taylor Swift will agree with Melania that this is very important. And, this is a serious, issue that happens with not just well-known people on the internet, but small, unknown people. So, you have no privacy. And I'm happy that Melania is actually doing something to protect people's privacy.
Well, I wasn't even aware that these deep fakes were being used, I don't know, to blackmail people, to intimidate them. So where they just manufacture pornography that features someone's face and then use that to terrorise them. So it is frightening what they're able to do these days, Alex.
Oh, yeah. I mean, with technology, you can make anything look real. So it's a very scary, dark future with the technology that they can do with all of this AI-generated pornography. So this is necessary, and I hope that we can stop it. But Rita, I don't know if you can stop AI-generated, images like this. It's just it's going to be difficult.
Now, I've got some good news, more good news from the border. Illegal crossings have plummeted further. The latest data shows that February was the lowest illegal crossings in history. That's the claim there from the White House, just 8,326. Alex, they said this couldn't be done. They said this was issues that America could not address. The people were being persecuted in countries in South America, and they were fleeing for their life, and nothing was going to stop the flow of illegal immigrants. And Donald Trump, within a month, has got the numbers down to this. I mean, this is astonishing.
Well, and I'm not trying to lessen all the great work the Trump administration has done, but really and truly, they've just stopped people from coming here by not subsidizing their trips here, by giving them free hotel rooms and free flights around the country. So, yes, Donald Trump is doing a great job, but all he had to do was say, stop coming. You're not getting a free handout anymore. And now they can't afford to come here on their own. So Tom Homan's doing a great job. President Trump is doing a great job. But this was a simple problem that they could have solved 4 years ago. And listen, I understand there are people that are having issues in countries, and there are, real reasons why a person would need to claim asylum. But we have had an open border policy where people have been able to manipulate it and just say that they're claiming asylum and come into our country and receive better social, security benefits or social services than even some of our military veterans. So it's absolutely disgusting. And the Trump administration has put their foot down, and now people are less motivated to come here and illegally cross our border.
Well, I always knew that this would happen, but the speed at which it has happened has surprised me. It has just been amazing how quickly they have just pulled those pull factors off the table. And guess what? If you take the sugar off the table, the numbers stop coming. Canada and Mexico aren't very happy. They've run out of time. The tariffs are in.
Is there any room left for Canada and Mexico to make a deal before midnight? And should we expect those Chinese tariffs, the extra 10%, to take effect tomorrow?
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
Alex, we know Canada and Mexico are understandably unhappy about all this. What's the reaction been in the States? Because imports from those countries are going to cost more. Is there any sort of a backlash to these tariffs?
I do think there is going to be a temporary backlash where, it's going to cost us some money in the short term. But I think in the long term, it's going to be better for our country if we can actually, tax these people correctly, because we've been giving them basically free money, and Mexico needs to play ball, and I don't think they've done enough, and they haven't stepped up to the plate enough and to satisfy Donald Trump. So at this point, I think they're necessary, and yes, we are going to feel the pain, but now you see car manufacturers saying they're going to build cars, they're going to build Hondas in America. So in the end, it will be better for our country, even though it might hurt in the short term.
Well, yeah, this is all about long-term boosting manufacturing in America, boosting investment, and making it an even bigger economic powerhouse. Now, I have to ask you about the Oscars before you go. They were on overnight. What was the highlight for you? There were so many highlights.
Oh my gosh, what a virtue signal fest. I do have to say I thought Conan O'Brien did a good job, and I really liked Adam Sandler, wearing his basketball shorts. That was the highlight of the night for me. But, just the virtue signaling and the Academy. But you know what, Rita, do you remember how cool the Academy Awards used to be? Everybody was watching it. I mean, there was a Sunday night, the whole world watched it. Now nobody cares. So Hollywood has lost its luster. And it's actually a sad sight to see, because I didn't see one of the movies nominated this year. So they need to make better stuff that, people can relate to.
And they need to actually remove all these diversity requirements for nominees. And also, yeah, make better movies, pick better options. But I don't think you're alone. I think many people have not seen or even heard of some of these nominations, and it's lost all relevance. It's no longer a night where you tune in eagerly to see who's going to be the best actor and the best actress. And I was surprised, I've got to say, though, that there wasn't more political activism. There's a teeny tiny bit, but given that it's the first month of Trump's second term, I was expecting to see speech after speech after speech decrying the state of America and MAGA and all things Trump. But I don't know, even Hollywood appears to have read the room. Alex Stein, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me, Rita. Always a pleasure.